Let's dive right into the topic, starting with the preface. So what questions does the preface raise? Just these 4 points. First, what is traditional Chinese medicine? Second, what are its key characteristics? Once we understand these points, we then explore the foundational framework of traditional Chinese medicine theory. What key topics does it cover? In the preface, it primarily explains the historical development of the next 2 topics. You can consider it a brief overview. But first, let me clarify. There's a course on medical history. This course covers the history of Chinese medicine. As this is your first TCM course, it's a brief introduction. It outlines the development of Chinese medicine, like a brief history, with the medical history course. So I can't go into too much depth, just give you an overview. The introduction focuses on the key features, TCM theory, but the main features of traditional Chinese medicine theory require some background knowledge to explain. So I might skip it for the introduction. So, where should we cover it? Explaining the philosophy, then revisiting the key features may make it clearer. Also, I typically follow these teaching habits. I'll stick to the order in the book, if it makes sense. If the book reverses the level of difficulty, I'll either order it by difficulty or start with some background and then cover the related content. Sometimes, the order in certain sections might be shuffled a bit, but not too often. Alright, let's start by understanding what traditional Chinese medicine is. The book covers concepts of traditional Chinese medicine, but I wasn't fully satisfied, so I revised it. Traditional Chinese medicine began in ancient China. There are actually 2 ideas here. One focuses on regional aspects of China, while the other traces back to ancient China. If we use these as definitions, they seem incomplete. One focuses on time-based principles, while the other emphasizes regional aspects. I don't think we quite hit the nail on the head, so I added that it's grounded in Chinese traditional culture. To put it more accurately, I believe that traditional Chinese medicine is fundamentally cultural. This leads to the question, is traditional Chinese medicine easy or hard to learn? To clarify, it's about the term Yi, Xunanjing. Why call it medicine? What I'm talking about is the study of medicine is learning textbook material from a test-taking viewpoint. At least, traditional Chinese medicine isn't harder than Western medicine. Why Nanjing? The problem lies in the word culture. Think about how much Chinese culture you studied in school. Actually, it's not much. Learning Mandarin isn't the same as studying Chinese culture. Let's trace it back. In the early 20th century, ideas like science and democracy came in, marking progress. China shifted from classical to modern Chinese. Another step forward historically. And there was the movement to reject Confucianism. This is tricky to explain. The Confucius statue was moved to Tiananmen Square. Good things stand tall, unbroken. There's likely an impact from this revival. From that point on, I get a sense of national detachment among those who originally studied traditional Chinese culture. These ethnic groups seem to be losing their significance. What do you mean by floating? There's a more evocative word floating. Traditional Chinese studies and culture are treated like floating memories. Consider this. China is known for its culture. You've lost touch with the roots of Chinese culture. What do you think was most affected by this process? I'm not an authority on other subjects. Traditional Chinese medicine has been somewhat affected. The main concepts of TCM originated in ancient times. So modern readers study TCM texts. Our modern textbooks translate ancient texts. Do they offer any benefits? I think it's beneficial, making it more objective and systematic. It's organized and easier to learn, though some information is lost in translation. In fact, our modern TCM texts aren't fully original, though they're easier to learn. By the end of these 5 years, to excel, dig deeper into the subject. You should return to the original ancient texts, but the problem is that after the White Tom village phenomenon, our ability to read ancient texts has diminished. Another traditional Chinese medicine is a form of cultural medicine, and it demands a solid understanding of ancient culture. But our education taught us Chinese, and we may have read a few ancient poems and a few prose pieces to grasp its style, but we know little about its cultural context. Learning Chinese medicine in this context can be challenging. I'm referring to the challenge I mentioned with Nanjing. This means that completing the textbook is just the beginning. To understand TCM, you need to explore its ancient roots and cultural foundation. What are the characteristics of TCM? Guided by a holistic perspective based on the physiology and pathology of meridians, and its approach focuses on syndrome differentiation. It's a study of human life, health, and disease. Here we encounter some unfamiliar experts. One is holistic perspective. One is diagnostic treatment. These are exactly what I mentioned, the basic principles of TCM. We'll revisit these principles after we cover philosophy. I'll briefly touch on the concept of holistic perspective. Traditional Chinese medicine is different from Western medicine. Western medicine focuses on isolated parts. How does it do this? TCM looks at the whole person. How does it do this? For example, if you have an issue in one part of your body, how does TCM deal with this? In addition to focusing on the specific issue, it considers this condition in relation to the whole, using the whole body as a reference point. What condition does this put you in? That's not all. Humans are part of the greater whole. We must also place humans within this greater whole of nature. How do we do that? For instance, the easiest aspects to grasp are time and space. Time includes the seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, and times of day. Day and night, divine marriage. For example, imagine you're sick. Did this happen in summer or winter? Or maybe in spring or fall? Timing matters. Let's focus more closely. Within a single day, let's say you have a fever. Do you feel hotter in the morning or afternoon? In traditional Chinese medicine, there are differing views. There's also the geographical environment. China is vast, with significant regional differences. Consider a fever patient. Fever symptoms can differ between the south and north. Temperatures certainly vary, so temperature differences are an influencing factor. Traditional Chinese medicine also considers these factors. This is the holistic approach. It has much more to offer. There's also the approach of diagnostic, differentiation, and treatment. Why isn't it called disease-focused treatment? We know that Western medicine treats diseases. Does traditional Chinese medicine treat diseases? So does traditional Chinese medicine. But beyond that, his focus is more on conditions. What do you mean by that condition? Expanding on this is a bit challenging, so I'll come back to it later, but I'll just touch on it briefly. He breaks one illness into several types. For example, a common cold is an illness. If you go to the hospital for treatment, traditional Chinese medicine is not satisfied with diagnosing it merely as a cold. He'll categorize your cold as wind cold or windy heat, or wind damp with a hint of cold. 3 patients might have 3 different symptoms. They'd all still be diagnosed with the flu. But for these symptoms, treatments differ in Chinese medicine. In simple terms, it means on the same disease base. Chinese medicine further tailors treatment to each individual. Next, regarding the Zhangfu system, focus on meridians, physiology, and pathology. Meridians are not recognized in modern medicine. In the section on meridians, proving their existence requires understanding the Zhangfu system. Everyone learns about hygiene and physiology in middle school. Note that according to Chinese medicine, their understanding differs regarding the lungs and kidneys compared to Western medicine. These organs may seem similar, but actually vary. You might say they're not entirely different. Which approach is more accurate? This conclusion is hard to reach. Because these systems differ, they're correct within their own systems. But when using one system to pinpoint the other, you would say they're not the same. I don't think there's such a standard of measuring Chinese medicine with Western medicine, or vice versa. It's like climbing a mountain. You follow the path you've chosen. I follow my own path. We both reach the top, but the views along the way are different. You can't claim that your view is correct. Mine isn't wrong. Everyone sees and learns in their own way. But we're all climbing the same mountain. Many of these landscapes are similar. Seeing different things isn't surprising. As we discussed, traditional Chinese medicine looks at things broadly. Western medicine focuses on the details. So differences are inevitable. Ultimately, it's a science that examines life and health and disease. That statement actually applies to all forms of medicine. Western medicine can apply it as well. So can traditional Chinese medicine, and Tibetan medicine applies it too. But there's an issue with the proportions. It seems that Western medicine places greater emphasis on disease. Traditional Chinese medicine probably is about life and health and has a relatively balanced focus on disease. It's simple. Wellness practices have become very popular recently. However, most wellness books focus on traditional Chinese medicine. Wellness isn't about treating diseases. It focuses on preventing illness before it occurs. It aims to improve overall life and health. While Western medicine addresses these issues, it may lack the specific focus of, it seems there isn't, a structured approach like traditional Chinese medicine offers, and its easy routines. So, traditional Chinese medicine has a significant academic advantage here. Next, let's introduce this subject, Basic Theories of Traditional Chinese Medicine. It covers 4 key sections. The core sections should be those 2 middle ones, which focus on TCMs, understanding of normal human bodies. Which chapters in the book cover this? Chapters on Cli, blood, Jing fluids, meridians, and constitution are part of this. Next, TCM's understanding of disease. This section covers. It includes causes and diseases. And the final section covers TCM's principles of health maintenance and treatment. This corresponds to the final slide on preventive principles. This issue involves traditional Chinese medicines, philosophical foundations. What are you asking about? It serves as a reasoning tool, designing methods based on ancient philosophical ideas. In simpler terms, it means tying together different experiences. It organizes knowledge in a more pleasant way into a clear, systematic, and easy-to-learn format. There's one tricky aspect of the basic theory. It's not about individual knowledge points. Knowledge points are relatively easy to remember. What specifically makes it difficult. Agree with the concept. About the cultural issue I mentioned. Think about your education from childhood, from elementary to middle school, to high school. You were taught Western scientific methods. So learning math, chemistry, and physics, even modern medicine isn't that hard. Why? You just need to remember it. You don't have any conflicting ideas. Now you're learning. Traditional Chinese medicine, and our traditional Chinese knowledge, isn't solid. How did the ancients think? For example, the traditional way of thinking in China has been lost on us. Let me explain. This embodies the Chinese mind. Yet, we Chinese have become ill at ease with it. So, our traditional education over these years did succeed or not? Judge for yourselves. That's why we've seen a surge in the past few years. Popular interest in traditional wisdom. In fact, it's also a backlash against traditional methods. We fail to teach what's valuable, so it's up to the people to discover on their own. Something like the lecture series on traditional culture. Many people voice opinions about Baijia lectures. They say the content is simplistic. I think even if it's simplistic, at least it promotes awareness. You say it lacks professional depth. Leave highly technical topics for experts to study. The general public just needs to understand the core concept. I think this works well. Let's look at this subject. So, you want me to switch my mindset and views abruptly and claim that traditional Chinese medicine is scientific. I don't have lofty expectations. I just want you to listen to me and see how it works. Gradually get used to this mindset. Gradually adapt and come to terms with it. If I talk about boosting your interest from the start, that's just empty talk. Spelling it out doesn't help. If you enjoy learning, it will come naturally. If you don't enjoy learning, it won't come naturally. Saying this doesn't guarantee you'll naturally get interested. For reference books, I suggest just two. One is a practice book that comes with this textbook. Similarly published by Xinhua, a practice book for this textbook. Paying attention to this doesn't mean the exam follows the practice book. All you need is a practice book. As you work through it, you'll easily spot your weak spots, and it's definitely better to try than skip. With a lot of questions, you'll feel overwhelmed. Mastering these questions leaves you with a basic understanding, covering 80-90% of the book. At least in terms of key concepts. I'll cover the concepts next time. There's also a dictionary. I think it's a handy guide. If you can afford it, go for the comprehensive dictionary. Otherwise, get a compact dictionary. Having this guide will be helpful. What other books should I read? I don't recommend it right now. Why are so many people rushing? Should I start with the Huangdi, Nijing, or Shanghanlan now? When you have free time and feel comfortable reading, you can read the same books. I have no objections, but I suggest waiting a year or so. Why? You don't know the basics of traditional Chinese medicine. If you dive into the Huangdi, Nijing, or Shanghanlan now, it might take you 50 minutes. I have no idea what you've been reading, but if it's been a year or two, you'll have the basics down, and then read through, in 5 minutes. Reading that fast now doesn't seem worthwhile. But if you think you're up for it, feel free to read. Sure. Another point is the numerous clauses in the textbook, most of which are attributed to Huang Jinlai. So how do we handle it? Introducing these other points serves to explain the core material. Our task is to cover the main points. Just make sure you understand. Clauses are only discussed if the teacher covers them. If not specifically required, they're not covered. Do we risk missing clauses if we don't read them? No problem. Later, we'll specialize in texts like the Huangdi Nijing, Shanghanlan. These courses are focused. Let's clarify this first, then we'll cover the traits of traditional Chinese medicine. Understanding TCM as a discipline. Here are two sections. The blue one comes from the textbook. The lower section is a summary as well. I think the textbook version is a bit wordy, so I'll go with what's below. TCM primarily focuses on natural science and incorporates elements of social sciences. First, let's define natural science. What is natural science? It studies nature's substances' movement and change, and their development principles and essence. Why is TCM considered a natural science? TCM focuses on studying humans. Humans are physical beings. Earlier, we noted that TCM views humans as part of nature. So, from this perspective, TCM is mainly a natural science. Next up, the social sciences. Social sciences explore social development and patterns of change. Why? Why does this relate to traditional Chinese medicine? People are inherently social. It differs from the physical and chemical sciences. Medicine focuses on the human body, so it inevitably has a social aspect. Can Western medicine be described the same way? I believe so, as Western medicine also focuses on humans. Take psychology, for example. Notice that psychology is categorized under the social sciences, not categorized as a natural science. So, having a psychological aspect inevitably includes elements of the social sciences. However, in traditional Chinese medicine, there's also a philosophical component. The natural sciences you studied had a philosophical basis. Yes, but that philosophical basis is usually hidden rather than prominent. But the philosophical elements serve as a backdrop. Though it's there in the background, it also comes to the forefront. In terms of philosophy, traditional Chinese medicine stands out significantly, more than other natural sciences, because it comes to the forefront. Other natural sciences don't make it into public view. Just think of it as a pure natural science. So, when we look at it this way, social sciences in traditional Chinese medicine constitute a larger proportion than general natural sciences, and it's even larger than in Western medicine. It's tough to pinpoint the exact proportion, isn't it? My guess is around 73%. But it's not that precise. You can only give it a rough estimate. That brings up an issue. There's a lot of discussion these days about whether TCM is scientific. To start with, I'd say science isn't very interesting. Once we learn enough about traditional Chinese medicine, we'll make our assessment gradually. But I can tell you now, those who say traditional Chinese medicine isn't scientific basically use purely scientific standards to evaluate traditional Chinese medicine, and within the realm of pure natural science actually encompasses systems science, and reductionist analysis uses a narrower form of reductionist analysis. The problem is, traditional Chinese medicine has never made such claims to be purely scientific. Includes elements of social science. You use a purely scientific standard to measure these components. Your standard seems off. It's not about me. So, is traditional Chinese medicine both basic and applied? What is basic science? Basic science is actually quite straightforward. It's a three-word answer. Why? A basic science aims to find the why behind various problems. Application science focuses on how. When you face a problem, how do you solve it? That's what application science does. Traditional Chinese medicine, which is more prominent. Application, but you say, which aspect of Western medicine has a larger focus? I feel it's probably more about fundamentals. Western medicine is essentially an experimental science. Many ideas come from experiments, forming directional hypotheses. There could be several hypotheses, which are then evaluated. Which one is currently the most convincing? Then it becomes more certain. It evolves into a theory, but problems may emerge later. New hypotheses emerge. Once it's mature, it will be applied clinically. I believe it will have a heavier emphasis on basic subjects. Traditional Chinese medicine stems from clinical practice and begins with medical experience, followed by theoretical integration, which is our book on basic theories of traditional Chinese medicine. But it's evident that what Western medical subjects are equivalent to our book. There are many more topics covered. You study anatomy, physiology, and pathology, microbiology, embryology, virology, and parasitology. While it covers numerous foundational subjects, we only have one text on basic theories. Do you mean just one book? Can it handle such in-depth clinical material? To me, it feels a little light. But it's not exactly lacking. Why? This raises a question. We often talk about reason and way. What's the difference? What does way mean? Could you explain it in simpler terms? What does it mean? By instinct, rules, or reasoning. Reason isn't quite like rules, but way has a bit of depth. To put it simply, this character is tricky to decipher. Laozi said, "The Tao that can be described is not the true Tao. What can be clearly said isn't the Tao. But if we can't explain it fully, can't we at least get the main points across?" So, how would you say the Tao can have two meanings today? One is the essence of the universe. The other is the rules of the universe. So, what is lie then? Lie is about specific things. For example, a specific cell in C. What does this cell do? So, this specific idea is called principle. Often, people who aren't familiar with Chinese medicine say, it doesn't make sense. In fact, TCM considers principles as a whole, unlike Western medicine, and it differs from modern scientific approaches. Modern science focuses on very specific principles. How does Chinese medicine address this? It draws human principles from the universal order. It begins by identifying natural patterns. Once the main patterns are identified, it applies them to find specific principles. Specific principles align with the main patterns. So these principles align with the universal order. To put it another way, Chinese medicine is a study of the way. Medicine includes both technique and the way. In fact, it includes medicinal agents or techniques, which have different levels. Chinese medicine falls under the domain of the way. Way of medicine includes medicine, medicinal agents, techniques, but we typically just call it medicine today. This title does feel a bit watered down. What about Western medicine? Western medicine is simply medicine. You can't call it inferior. Westerns lack the desire to seek the way. Neither do I. I seek your guidance, but Chinese people inherently seek enlightenment. So often our names don't quite cut it. Like martial arts, they call it karate over there. Taekwondo is similarly named for their path. Such deep and vast knowledge. You call it technique? How can you go global from Asia? The names are not quite right. Here you call it martial way, which is truly grand and all-encompassing. You truly deserve that name. Our content might appear sparse, but it's actually quite rich. So many people know that studying traditional Chinese medicine requires insight. What is this insight? Just share the smaller details based on these general rules. No need to go into every detail. Telling everything doesn't fit with Chinese thinking. But telling you everything, that's how Westerners think. The problem is that we're used to the Western way. We think this helps us understand as we gradually get used to it. Next, let's talk about Eastern traditions and their holistic nature. As I mentioned, TCM is fundamentally a cultural practice. Let's take a break